All right, my name is Gilles Poulin-denis. I was gonna start off by saying that I work in theater as an actor, playwright, but that's already been said. So yes, I've written quite a few plays, full-length plays, short plays, and I've translated a few, mostly from English to French. And so tonight, I'll be speaking to you about translation and my experiences as a playwright and as a translator. First off, I'd like to talk about the first play that I wrote called Rear View. It's the story of a young man in the middle of an existential crisis who leaves Montreal and drives straight ahead all night long, and he finds himself lost in northern Ontario, somewhere close to Sudbury. Now, the language in the play is mostly in French, but it does have some English words, some English syntax into it, and as well as some English scenes. And what was interesting is that I got very different reactions to this aspect when we toured the country. So when we were out west, the Francophones there were saying, oh, this is a very Québécois play. And we were in Quebec, people were saying, oh, we love the English in there, it's so Franco-Canadian. And that bilingualism is written within the script, it's part of the script. And the main character's inner monologue is in French, but his discussions with all the other characters in the play, except for one, are done in English. This is an important point that I'll get back to in just a second. In 2012, Rear View was translated by Elisabeth Rafols in Catalan. So I had the pleasure of spending 3 weeks in Barcelona for workshops and readings at the Sala Beckett in Barcelona and Teatro Cursal in Manresa. While I was there, I saw the possibility of adapting the play so that the French in the play could be translated to Catalan and that the English in the play translated to Spanish. And I remember talking to Elisabeth about this, and she didn't think it was a very good idea. And she explained to me why. It's because the relationship between the Catalan and the Castilians are very complex, and she feared it would change the nature of the play, that the national politics would kind of overpower the story. And I guess that was one of my first lessons in translation is you need to know when to translate and when to adapt. And in this case, Elizabeth wanted her translation to be about the words, and she wanted it to be a fully Canadian story. And I think she was right, because this made the play more relatable to the Catalan audience, and in a way it made it easier that way rather than adapt it to a Spanish society. The play was then produced in 2013, as Giovanni mentioned, in Brussels, Belgium, in its original French version. And I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, it's all good. In this case, it wasn't so much a translation of language, but rather a translation of imagery. Part of the scenic descriptions that are in the text is about Northern Ontario, and there's very descriptive. Now, those images were slightly transformed in the Belgian version that I saw on stage. For example, the northern landscape turned into a sunflower field on stage, which doesn't happen in Northern Ontario. But in one scene, the character enters a small town bar that's based on an actual bar in Sturgeon Falls, Ontario, and meets some locals that are playing pool. In the Belgian version, this scene had a sort of late night college town university feel to it, rather than like a dank Northern Ontario drinking hole. Now at this point, the director had the main character put on a traditional Native American headdress. I'd just like to mention that there's no Aboriginal allusions within the script. This isn't part of the script at all. So to me, it seemed to come out of nowhere. Of course, this would not be a choice done in Canada because of the importance of the headdress for the Aboriginal people, and it would seem disrespectful. But I understood that it made sense to the Belgian audience because of the imagery, the European imagery that they have of the road trip, of the mythical America. And I thought it was interesting to see how the same words, the same story could convey two different images. Now, as a translator, I've also encountered challenges, more specifically on Rear View, because I'm actually in the process of translating it to English. And the main issue is, in the English version, is the bilingualism that's part of the work. It's part of the script. Most Francophone audiences understand English, but the reverse is not necessarily true. So I can't simply translate the French parts into English and the English parts into French. And the major issue is, how do you translate the identity of the main character? The fact that in the original script he speaks English with the other characters, but he decides to address the audience in French, speaks about the nature of the character. He doesn't speak the same language as the other characters. He's he's not one of them. So how do I convey that to an audience with only using one language? I need to find a device to make that clear, and I haven't completely found it yet. I'm still working on it. And sometimes in translation, you need to adapt more than translate. I face the opposite problem that I have in Rearview regarding languages when I was working on this play, Jake's Gift by Julia Mackey. In the play, the Canadian soldier goes back to Normandy and meets a young French girl on the beach. In the original version, we understand the theatrical convention that both characters speak the same language. But in French, France French and Canadian French is not the same. And the audience, a French audience, would not accept that accent be the same. So I had to sort of change the way that the characters express themselves. So I think in translation, it's always a question of choice. And the key is always to ask, who is the target audience? And the answer to that question, usually, for me anyways, informs me of what is the right choice. Then again, if you ask any translator what he thinks of someone else's translation, I think he'll always tell you, it's okay, but I would have made a different choice. Thank you.